Hey guys, in today's video, we'll be going over how to install the View Series framing when attaching to a ceiling grid. Now for this video, I do not have a ceiling grid installed. We will be using the wood blocks as a representation of the ceiling grid. The amount of strength and support a ceiling grid will provide will vary from one project to the next. Our goal is to attach our framing to the ceiling grid to create as much strength and support as possible. Now, the amount of strength and support you need will be dependent on the installation situation you have. For situations where you have sliding doors, we want to make sure to create as much strength and support as possible. The reason we need to do this is because we will have a door hanging off of the framing attached to the ceiling. Therefore, we need to create enough support to help support the weight of the door. Situations where we have swing doors or fixed panes of glass only, we don't necessarily need to create as much support as we need for a sliding door. The reason being is because there will be no weight pulling down on the ceiling other than the framing materials itself. In this video, we're mainly going to focus on attaching our framing to the ceiling grid when we have sliding door situations. The same concept will apply to both the swing door and fixed pane areas as well. This section of the video will briefly go over the installation process for the situation I'll be working with. For detailed installation instructions on how to frame for swing doors or sliding doors in our View series, go ahead and check out the videos for those situations. With that said, we'll go ahead and get started. The View wall starts will run from floor to ceiling. Once you have your wall starts in place, you can then measure for the View tracking guide attaching to the ceiling. The View tracking guide will be the same length, therefore they can be cut together. Once you have the View track guide cut, you can then separate the View track from the View guide. Once we have the View guide separated, we can then go over how to prep the View guide for installation. Take the View guide and press it tight against the View wall start and place it on the predetermined layout lines. Once in place, mark the View guide where the View guide intersects with the ceiling grid. This mark will tell us where we need to prep the View guide to allow us to attach it to the ceiling grid. We'll need to mark this location at each point where the View guide intersects with the ceiling grid. As mentioned, for sliding door applications, we want to make sure we mark each intersecting point. For the swing door or fixed pane locations, we can get away with going every other ceiling grid. With the View guide marked, we can now go ahead and prep the View guide so we can attach it to the ceiling grid. Before attaching the View guide to the ceiling grid, make sure to install the correct amount of leveling bolts and make sure they're in the right location. Also, make sure to include the View L bracket on the end of the View guide where the View guide will come together with the wall starts. Once everything is in place, you can then attach the View guide to the ceiling grid through the holes that we had prepped. Now in this case, I'm just going to use a self-tapping screw. It is up to you on the type of screw that you use, as we do not provide the external attaching hardware. We want to make sure we have a nice solid connection between the View guide and the ceiling grid. You can then go through and run the rest of the attaching screws. When attaching the View L bracket to the wall start, it's important to make sure the L bracket is pressed tight into the inside of the View guide. This is important because the L bracket is going to help support this end of the View guide. To attach the L bracket, press it tight against the wall start and use the added leveling bolt for the L bracket to press the L bracket tight to the inside of the View guide. Once the L bracket is tight, you can then attach the L bracket using two 3/4 inch framing screws. With the L bracket installed, the installation of the view guide is complete. The next step we'll need to do is to install the finish cover onto the view wall start. There will be a separate video on how to properly install the finish cover in this situation. Once the finish cover is installed, we can then install the view track. With our finish cover installed onto the wall start, we can now install our view track. Before installing the view track, again make sure you have the correct amount of leveling bolts and make sure they're in the correct location. You also need to make sure that they are perfectly level before installing the view track. With the leveling bolts in place, we can then install our view track onto the view guide. With the view track tight to the finish cover, we can now attach the view track to the view guide using the 4-inch attaching screws. With the view track installed, we can then install the view saddle. As a reminder, the view saddle is used to help keep the view track from twisting. Once that's in place, the installation is complete. With the way that we attach the view guide to the ceiling grid and use the view L bracket to help support the view guide, we have created as much support as we possibly can when attaching to a ceiling grid. Now, there may be a situation where the ceiling is too weak and additional bracing is needed to be added. We do have an option for adding additional bracing, and I'll go over that in a separate video. This will be the conclusion of this video. If you have any questions, please contact our office.